All right, we'll start with Nancy's image, and this is a senior portrait, but it almost falls more into the class portrait or class picture sort of genre. So I'll talk about that a little bit. First, let's look at this technically. You're at ISO 800, 30 millimeters, so that's wider angle. And I'm posting with these critiques that view of what wide angle lenses do to our subjects, especially when we're close to them. So here I would recommend you scoot back a little bit and shoot this with like a 70 millimeter lens. That would be much more effective than shooting with a wider angle lens. This distorts the subject instead of compressing them in a way that can be much more pleasing. You're at f5.6, 1/125th of a second. So those look good. The lighting on your subject, it looks like you have two lights on your subject, one coming in from the right side, fully illuminating them, and maybe a little bit of a second light opening up the other side. There's not any dark shadows. It's more informational lighting, not like adding any drama or anything to the image, which seems appropriate. And when I think of a senior portrait, it's not necessarily someone dressed up in a cap and gown. We actually, in the reading, if you can recall, it was more about avoiding that. It actually, I think, said specifically to avoid that, because what we want is the personality of the subject. This is kind of, the senior portrait is kind of a capstone to your time in high school. So we want to learn about the subject. So it could be that they're into baseball, or they play the clarinet, or they are in the chess club. Things like that are what we generally want to see brought forward in the senior portrait. Just photographing someone in their cap and gown is more of what we would expect for the yearbook image and more of that class picture. So if I analyze this as a class picture, I think then it's working much better. Some things that you could do to improve, or one thing that you could do to improve this would be to pull your subject away from the background. Allow that background to fall out of focus, and then it won't look so much like they're pushed up against a wall, but we'll just have this neutral background behind them. The advantage of using a seamless over a wall is that you're not going to get these reflections. We can see the reflections from the light, and they're two different colors of reflections, right? Maybe this is window light and this is artificial light. And so we're seeing those reflections, we're seeing the texture of the background as well. So pulling your subject away could make it appear more like a seamless than it would this wall, and I think that could be more effective. All right, and then we're going to move into these last two images, and both of these images are the boudoir. So this image is by, let's see, Daniel, and you're at ISO 2000, so a really high ISO. And as we look at this, we're going to blow up the side here, and we can see that digital noise, and even more than that, you see how there's kind of banding happening. So bringing down your ISO would be better here. 32 millimeters, I think works fine for an image like this. F5 and 1/100th of a second. So all of those settings look good. Now, something that's really important for these boudoir shots is the lighting, and having softer lighting that's really pleasing on your subject. And you definitely have that as this light's coming across her leg. It's softer light. We can see there's a harshness to it when we see the shadows down here and over here, but overall there's a softness to it. It does have more of a blue tone to it. Let's look in the develop module, and I'm going to look at the numbers right here. And you can see that it has more of a blue tone to it, which in an image like this, I think you would want to warm up a little bit more than cool down. So I would adjust the temperature on this to have it a little bit of a warmer image instead of a cooler image, because I think that better reflects the intent of the image. But what you've done here is you've really abstracted the body. We're seeing the torso, her backside, her legs, and we're just focused on the way that the light is contouring around this. So I think you did a really nice job with abstraction and simplifying your image. The lighting that you're using is great. I would just adjust the temperature of that to warm it up a little bit. And then this image is by Nick. And sorry, Nick, when I was looking at the first images, I thought yours was the street image, and I thought you didn't have a category, but you definitely did have a category for yours, and you wanted your image to be under the boudoir work as well. So you're at ISO 100, 50 millimeters, f6.3 at 1/125th of a second. So all of those settings look good. You want a little bit of a faster shutter speed if you're hand holding and moving around a lot, but your subject shouldn't be moving very quickly. So generally you don't need that fast of a shutter speed. So 1/125th of a second seems good. The light that you're using, it looks like it might be window light coming in. It's softly illuminating your subject, and it really falls off as we get towards the bottom of the face. And that's creating quite a mood in this image. There's almost a dark side to this as you're getting close to him, which I find interesting for this type of work. So I think that's working well for you. Now, with that lighting, that I think works fine on his face and his hand, probably in post-processing, I'd pull that down a little bit. But the background is really light, and I would probably pull that back a little bit. You don't want the background so bright that it's brighter than your subject. I think bringing this sort of tonal quality into the background, or even darker than that, would create more of a mood that matches this fall off on his face. The narrative or the idea of what you're doing, you've just shown us this very small area of the subject, the hands coming across the face and the head. We can tell that your subject's on a bed because you've told us what category this is in, but I don't think that's completely clear here. I think either seeing more of the subject's body or seeing more of the background and where the subject is would further your narrative. Right now, we don't really know one or the other. We can't really tell. And if you hadn't told me the category, I don't know if I would have guessed this. So just pulling back a little bit and showing us one or the other, more of his figure or more of the background, I think could fill out the story. Or if this was part of a series, you could fill that out with the series, right? So if you were doing a photo shoot and you had shot 15 images and he was buying, you had 15 final images that were great and he was going to buy 3 of them, that might build out this narrative a little bit more. But just having the single image right here, I don't think pushes that boudoir in the way that we would expect it to be. So I would give a little bit more of an environment on